It's really very lovely to be here. And I've been, in fact, in the Philippines for the past week in Tagaytay, which I love. And I'm leaving tomorrow night, so this is my last night. But anyway, it's a delight to be meeting you and sharing a few thoughts. And after a little bit of an interlude of some music, we'll have some time for some interaction as well. You know, some say that there's two prime emotions in life, love and fear, and that all other emotions stem from these two emotions. All of us sitting here know how absolutely paralyzing fear can be, don't we? Terrifying. But also, love can be absolutely life-transforming. And some say that love is letting go fear. And as you heard, I grew up in Melbourne. And so a few years ago, one of my friends contacted me about his mother. And I've known her most of my life, and she's a lovely, sweet person. But she always described herself as quite a fearful, anxious, nervous type of person. And she was diagnosed with cancer, and that just upped her fear and anxiety a lot. And one day her son rang me, who was my friend, and said, "Mum is in hospital and she's terminal. Would you go and see her?" So I went along to the hospital. And you know how in life sometimes you have an experience, it's like recorded. It's like a video recording in my mind. I can see it now. It was dusk when I went to the hospital. And I walked in towards her room, which is at the end of a long passage. And when I got to the door, it was absolutely dark. And all I could see just was the silhouette of her lying in her bed. And you know how you get a feeling, it was so still, so I tippy-toed in and I just sat on a chair. I didn't say anything. And I was just sitting there in silence, and out of the silence, a voice came. She spoke and she said, "Charlie, I love you." And quite honestly, it was totally uncharacteristic of this lady. And it was almost like once she was diagnosed and she knew that she wasn't going to survive, she thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. I may as well let go my fear and become the person I really want to be. So she really became incredibly loving and incredibly warm. That was a huge lesson for me, because you know how sometimes in life we have so much fear of what other people are going to think of me. What will other people feel if I really express my love, express my true feelings, express my beauty? Because often I think we dance our life according to our fears, and often the real me can't really come out and express itself. And for me, of all the things I value in my life, it's the experience of love. Who would agree with that? I think it's pretty unanimous, isn't it? Because my observation and what I love about spirituality is that spirituality is learning about yourself, observing yourself. My observation of myself is that when my heart is full of love, I feel so easy, so relaxed, and I'm definitely more compassionate and generous-hearted towards people around me. To me, the most powerful resource in life is a loving heart. A loving heart can break down barriers, fill hearts in pain. You know, a loving heart is incredibly powerful. But at the other end of the spectrum is fear. And the millisecond my mind is gripped by fear, the heart begins to palpitate, the stomach churns, adrenaline just curses through our system. And just as love is the seed of so much positive emotion, I would say that fear is the seed of so much negative emotion. we feel stressed, we feel tense, we feel anxious. And you know, when fear comes, the mind begins to have wild imagination. We can't relax, we can't sleep, we can't concentrate. And one of the fascinating things in our world at the moment is that there's a lot of research connecting emotion with health. And there's so much research between the heart and fear. And if someone came running into this room now and said, there's a fire in this building, what's the first thing that would happen? Before we all run for that door there. What's the first thing? Boom, 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 boom. Your heart goes up, doesn't it? If every day of your life you have fear of a personality in your life, you have fear of a family member, you have fear of someone in the workplace, you have fear that I might not be good enough, I might fail in something, you have these emotional fears, what is that doing? That's putting pressure on my heart, and my heart is just like a little pump, and at some point my heart can break down. And so really beginning to work with fear is not just for my, shall we say, mental well-being, it's even also for my physical well-being too. But unfortunately, we live in a world that is gripped by fear. And sometimes, I don't know what you feel, but when we look at our television, our news every night, we see a world where the streets aren't safe, the homes aren't safe, nowhere is safe. So many parts of our world are so aggressive, there's so much anger, so much violence in so many parts of our world. But that's like the big picture of life. All of us have our own individual fears, and it's a part of life that we carry these individual anxieties or fears. And what I'm doing at the moment, which is speaking publicly, is a great fear for so many people. I once read on the internet that it said something like, would you like to speak in public or swim in a tank of sharks? Guess what? Some people chose to swim in the tank of sharks. Because why is it that when we stand in front of others, we feel judged? We feel judged. There's so many fears, and I even have a friend who's a concert pianist, and he lives in Europe. He was actually telling me that some of the best piano players in the world never perform, because in front of an audience their fingers freeze up and they can't really play in front of an audience. But one of the greatest fears for most of us is the fear of rejection, the fear of not being loved, the fear of not belonging. And I remember once Leela was talking about the retreat centres in Australia. We have 4 beautiful meditation centres, and at one of them we had a large group, about this many people. And we were discussing openly all our fears that we carry in life. And we came to the conclusion as a whole group, probably the main fear in life was the fear of rejection, the fear of not being loved by other people. But tonight I really wanted to visit this subject from a spiritual perspective. There's a psychological perspective, but tonight I'd really love to offer some thoughts of how to begin the journey to perhaps understand my fears and how to work with them so that I can reduce the effect. Because definitely fear takes the quality of life away. And the first area of fears I'd like to visit is physical fears, like the fear of loss of wealth, whether it's, possessions or material things. the fear of loss of health, illness, pain, old age. At the heart of physical fears is the fear of loss. And probably at the heart of that is really the fear of loss of my body, the fear of death. And it's not just the fear of death, actually. It's the fear of the loss of a whole identity I've spent a whole life building. My whole sense of my self-image, my reputation, my successes, my attainments. And sometimes I have the image in my life that we're born. And we say, this is my mum, this is my dad, these are my brothers, these are my sisters. And then, more, this is my city, this is my country. And so I'm sort of creating this sense of identity. As I go further, this is my education, this is my qualifications, this is my job. And then even further, this is my family, this is my partner, these are my children. You think, my whole life I'm sculpturing this image, this sense of who I am. And then in just a second, we go. And it's like the ultimate fear for all of us is really this instant transition from this whole sense of self. Suddenly, I leave it. And it's something which we all feel very uncomfortable about to talk about. But I would say the first step on this journey to a future without fear is really understanding that the only thing that is permanent in life is change. And I love the analogy that life is like a train journey. And when you're on a train, what happens? The train stops at a station, people hop on the train, people hop off the train, goes to the next station. People hop on, people hop off, it goes to the next station. This keeps happening. The nature of life is people come into your life, people go out of your life. Wealth comes into your life, wealth goes out of your life. Roles, responsibilities come and go. We can't hold on to anything. And really, the more I attach my heart to anything temporary, I build fear and insecurity into my life. And this is one of these great spiritual lessons, how to love people, how to enjoy life, how to live it to the maximum. But the more I attach my heart, I fear losing that I become dependent on. So the more I become dependent, the more I build fear and insecurity into my life. So the first understanding I find spiritually on this journey to understanding fear is really to understand the nature that change is always happening. To embrace life, to love life, as soon as I attach my heart, I'm the one that's actually building this fear and insecurity inside. And then we say, well, that's life. That's the way life is. That's the way life is constructed. But spiritually, what we see is what is permanent in all this change. What is permanent in all this change? And to me, the problem is that we have forgotten the permanent self and we only remember the temporary self, which is my body. And this is why I would say the second step on the journey to a future without fear is to know and experience who I am. Who am I? Is there a more important question to answer in life? To me, the first lesson in school should be, who am I? We learn everything about the world out there, but how much do we know about the world in here? And the way I see it these days is that inside all of us there are 3 personalities. 2 increase fear in my life. One of them helps me really begin to work through my fear and let go. The first personality I call the I of arrogance or the I of superiority. And this personality takes its whole sense of identity from the labels of my body. So who am I? I see myself, my gender, my nationality, my religion, my age, my profession. What is common to all those labels? They are all temporary. And when this I, the I of arrogance, is ruling my inner system, I compare with others. And I think it's a subconscious thing. I think I am better, I know more, I am right. But when my ego is ruling in my inner system and it comes into my feelings, I feel so easily insulted, disrespected, not valued, excluded, sensitive. Anyone here sensitive? Everyone's smiling, but no. Have you ever wondered why we're so sensitive? Have you ever thought, what is it that the tiniest thing can disturb you so deeply? And fear as well. Because when my ego is ruling in my inner system, there's a deep relationship between ego and fear. Fundamentally, the more ego I have, the more fear I have in life. The fear that people see through my facade, that actually I'm not so confident. I don't have so much love and respect for myself. The fear that I won't live up to others' expectations. I'm worried that, I've put an image out there and I'm putting pressure on myself to live up to that image. And so that first I, the I of arrogance, the I of superiority, the more ego in life, the more I experience fear. Because I'm putting out a facade and I'm afraid that I won't live up to the facade and the image that I've created. It's almost normal today. But actually the I of arrogance or the I of superiority is really a facade for the second I, which I call the I of inferiority, the I of lack of self-respect, or the ego of inferiority. And when this I is ruling in my inner system, once again, this is based on all the labels of my body, the temporary self. When this I is ruling, I compare with others, but I think others are better. Others know more. Others don't love me. Others don't value me. Others don't respect me. When my lack of self-respect is dominating my inner world, then this thinking just is constantly going on. Personally, I feel this I is dominating our world at the moment. This sense of the ego of inferiority. And when it comes into my feelings, when the ego of inferiority or the lack of self-respect, I feel hopeless about myself. I feel inadequate. I feel unworthy. I feel inferior. And I would say depressed. In psychology, depression is like a sadness that my dream in life to be loved and valued hasn't happened. But in spirituality, depression is like a mourning for the loss of my true identity. I'm living my life, but who am I really? And so when the ego of inferiority there, the lack of self-respect, I have so much fear that people will reject me, people won't love me, I won't belong anywhere, I won't be included anywhere. So when I have a false sense of who I am, it starts to create a lot of fear. And what happens is that because these two I's dominate my life at the moment, I go, one day I'm up, and the next day I'm down. 1 hour I'm up, the next hour. There's massive mood swings in that way. What spirituality says on the journey to knowing myself, to start the journey of dismantling the power of fear over me, is the third I is the original I. That I am a soul. The soul, or the spirit, or the consciousness, or the psyche, is my true self. And the soul is a wonder. The soul exists, but it's just a point. And in mathematics, a point exists, but it has no length, breadth, or width. The soul is so subtle. I am a soul, and when I become aware the soul has no label of a gender, a nationality, a religion. All these things are the things that absolutely divide us in life. And actually, when I start to practice who am I, it's like I find a sweet place inside where I feel so comfortable about who I am. It's like coming home to a place inside where I feel so easy, so relaxed. I take all the pressure off myself to impress people, to look good. I start to reconnect with my fundamental self. I am a peaceful soul. And this is actually, I would say, the second step. And why does this step help me so much in managing the numerous fears that most of us have? Because the soul is eternal. The soul always exists. I can never cease to be. I can never die. The soul is immortal. And when I was living in London, I started my meditation practice there. I had a job at Imperial College in the physics department. I can't even remember how I got the job. But I used to talk to the scientists, and they told me, I asked them about the unit of matter, like the atom, the molecule. They was actually searching at that time for the quark, which at that time was the smallest particle. They said, we believe matter always exists. So just as the building blocks of this body always exist, though they will go into other forms, I, the soul, always exist. And as I begin to reconnect with who I am, and the power of ego, of superiority, and ego of inferiority have less power over me, then I really start to take back my sense of self-authority and self-understanding. And this self-realization, I start to experience, not just believe, who I am. And I feel that, the first step in meditation is actually this self-realization. Easy to know, easy to believe, but to really experience the reality that I'm a soul, a point source of energy living in the front of the brain. And sometimes I think that my inner world is like a tree. A tree has a seed, a trunk, branches and leaves. Your thoughts are the leaves. How many thoughts do we have? And a big tree, how many leaves does it have? Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. But what is feeding the leaves is the branches, which is my mental and emotional habits, like fear and worry and anxiety. What's feeding the branches is the trunk. It's my subconscious. Freud said 90% of our behaviors come out of our subconscious. But what feeds the trunk is the seed, my sense of identity. And when I sow a false seed of who I am in my inner world, that I'm a temporary body, it influences my subconscious, it influences all my mental emotional patterns, and on the top, so much thinking, because I'm confused. I don't know who I am. And I'm always sort of trying to find a sense of self. And a part of all that thinking and feeling is so much fear and anxiety. So what are we doing when we begin to sit to meditate? I'm sowing the seed of the permanent self, the true self in my inner world. And when I sit down and reconnect with who I am as this soul, this spirit, the consciousness, it influences the trunk, my subconscious, it influences all my mental emotional patterns, and on the top, my thoughts begin to cool down, my thoughts begin to calm down. So that first step understanding there's nothing but change going on. The second step, this realization of who I am and experiencing. So that first real lot of fears, I would say, are physical fears. The second, I would perhaps call them psychological fears. And we have mental fears of change, failure, all the emotional fears. But there's a term in psychology called phobias. And they used to be known as irrational fears. And there's so many phobias. Claustrophobia, a fear of confined spaces, aviophobia, a fear of flying. How many phobias do you think there are? There's about 400 that are known phobias. All of us have a few of these. And I remember we have a retreat centre in the Blue Mountains outside Sydney. And one day a man came to do some work at that place. And it's a beautiful place. It's a World Heritage area. It has a waterfall. And he was looking at it and he said, "This is such a beautiful place, such a wonderful place, but I wouldn't want to live here." I said, "Well, that's weird. Why?" He said, "Spiders." He said, "I'm an arachnophobiac." It took me a while to learn that word, a fear of spiders. But actually, when we begin to go deeper into this journey, the first step, as I was saying, is that the understanding that there's nothing but change going on. The only permanent thing is change. The second, to know and experience who I am as a soul. But the third step on this journey of dealing with fear is to understand the journey of the soul through time. Because in my subconscious, I collect the stories of the past that overlay and influence my present. And the soul is actually an overname for three aspects of consciousness: the mind, the intellect, and the subconscious impressions. So the mind actually receives the information from the sense organs. So what you see, what you hear, it's like a screen. Everything you see, you hear, you touch is thrown up on the screen of the mind. The intellect is that faculty assessing the information. As I'm speaking now, part of you is saying, "I agree with that, I don't agree with that. Yes, that's good, that's, That is your intellect working. You're getting all this data from life constantly. Your intellect is constantly assessing that data. Once you assess it, you make a decision and you do an action. And every action leaves an impression in your subconscious. So who am I? I carry this whole story of my past in my subconscious, which is overlaying on my present. And the situations and the experience of the past are all stored in my memory track. So when I come in front of a situation, almost instantly I go back as a reference point to what is my past experience. So if as a child I was bitten badly by a dog, as soon as I see a dog, I go back to that experience and fear comes. If as a child I didn't feel really loved or valued in my family, as soon as I enter relationships, sometimes the fear comes or the anxiety comes that maybe this relationship won't work out, or this person may reject me or not like me. And so it's like I'm sitting here in the present, but I carry the whole story of my past in my subconscious. And many of the recordings are of fear of the past. So when I come to a similar situation in the present, it actually affects me. What is fear? I would say fear is an emotion experience in anticipation of danger, evil, or pain, whether real or imagined. Fear is an emotion experienced in anticipation of danger, evil, or pain, whether real or imagined. You know, in the old days, science believed that fear was genetic. You inherited it. But now they agree with spirituality that fear is really more based on your past experience. And once I saw a video of a little girl in India. She was so young that she couldn't even walk. And she was sitting with a king cobra. And the cobra had had the poison taken out of it. And this little girl was just sitting on her bottom on the ground, and the cobra was over her, and it was just going like this at her face. And the little girl was just looking at it, really not affected. And after a while, the cobra kept going like this. The little girl goes like this, like little children do at the cobra. And after a few minutes, the cobra backed off, and the little girl's chasing the cobra. It's an amazing thing to see because she had no recorded fear. She had no data in her subconscious to say, I should be fearful of this. It's an amazing thing to see. Because once I was in South Africa and I was talking to a group of people, and someone put up their hand and said, how much fear is real and how much fear is imagined? And my answer was, I haven't got a clue. And he said, I've Googled it. And as you know, all truth lies on Google today. And he said, research shows, and I've looked it up since, you know, between 85 to 95% of fear is imagined, they say. That is anxiety. Anxiety is imagined fear. Maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. And the mind begins to imagine and project into the future. And it's amazing, maybe out of every time you feel fearful, 15 times, once out of every 15, 20 times is actually, it's a real experience. Most of it is my imagination, is my anxiety. And so, as I begin to look into this, that one, you know, I am a soul, and I start to know who I am. Secondly, I begin to understand I've collected experiences of the past that are overlaying on my present. So how do I resolve them? This is the very reason we meditate, because the idea of meditation is threefold. Firstly, to sit down and use my thoughts to create a feeling of peace, to reconnect with that essential self and feel my inner world calming down and cooling down. But secondly, is to clean the subconscious, all the collected data of the past, which is overlaying and making me fearful of this situation and fearful of that situation. And thirdly, that my meditation gives me the power to do actions to create a positive future. And so meditation is really helping me start to resolve the story of fear in my subconscious. And one big aspect of fear, I think, is of certain personalities. You know, sometimes there's certain people in our lives that they have an authority. We fear their decisions, or we fear their opinions, or we fear their control of me and my life. And I think, you know, many of us have that fear about authoritarian people especially. One of the things, as I found on this journey of self-knowledge, of self-awareness, is that when I start to realize I am a soul, and I, the soul, am beyond gender, nationality, all those things, those labels are for my body, not the soul. So is everybody else a soul. And when you start to look beyond the image and really see the real person, it begins to change the way I relate to people. Sometimes I think relationships are like an iceberg. You know, not that they're cold, but an iceberg has 10% above the water and 90% below the water. And when you meet somebody, usually what we see is the physical image, and we say, oh, I like that, you know, we're attracted to how people look. This is human nature today. But what happens when you get to know people? When you spend time with people over a year, 2, 3, what happens is the 90% below, in the subconscious, the personality starts to emerge. And sometimes, at first, we're attracted physically, but when the personality comes out, the nature, the character, we're not so sure whether this is something I really want to engage with. But as I begin to understand that just as, you know, I'm a soul and I carry my story in my subconscious, my fears, so do other people as well. And it helps us have more compassion for others, because each one of us is often dancing to the tune of my past experiences and my past story as well. So we have physical fears and we have psychological fears. We could probably say that we also have, if I can use the word, spiritual fears. That means things like the fear of the unknown, the fear of sorrow, the fear of my own dishonesty. If I've been dishonest in my life, I have the fear that I might have to face that dishonesty at some point of time. And on this spiritual journey, this wonderful journey of self-learning, there are universal laws that operate. And one of the laws is in the Bible: as you sow, so you reap. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if I transgress universal laws and universal truths, there's a repercussion of that. I fear the result. Sometimes I carry a lot of guilt or worry about when I transgress those laws. And once I was in a country, and I don't like labels, and forgive me for this, but it was probably in the way the world operates and its labeling systems, what you'd call a third world country. And I was doing a thing with some people from the government, and one man after 3 days asked to speak to me, and he said, I'm absolutely riddled with fear. And I said, why? And he said, because for years I took bribes. And he said, I wanted to send my children to England for an education. So for so many years, I'm so respected as one of the most senior people in this country. But I'm absolutely fearful that all my colleagues and my friends will find out really who I am. And I remember him saying to me that my children have got a good education, they're living a good life. He used his own language, I've ruined my own life. And this is where, on this journey to resolving fear, honesty is an integral part. They say when we're honest, we can sleep easily. When I cheat myself, when I cheat others, when I cheat in life, it's hard to live with my own conscience in that way. And that's where another step on this journey of working with fear is really to be honest, absolutely honest. We can live with ourselves very easily. Because the journey of the inner journey is, I feel, the journey of love. And this journey of love is really developing 3 loving relationships in life. The first is a loving relationship with myself as a soul. This is like building a platform. Sometimes I think we search for true love. You know, we invest our heart in relationships. You just think how much you've given to your family and your friends. You give absolutely everything. But there's a huge human dilemma that no relationship is permanent. Whether it's time, whether it's change, whether it's conflict, whether it's death, the object of my love will go. And what spirituality really says is to put two anchors down in my life to make me solid. As our world swirls around us with so much fear and anxiety is going through the roof, the first anchor to put down to stabilize myself as a person is to know and experience who I am. And this is really the journey of meditation, to sit down. And what I do every single morning of my life, when I wake up, I sit quietly and I just go on this little inner journey of stepping back, identifying with what I do. That's not who I am, that's what I do. My career, my job, even my family responsibilities. Then stepping back from all the labels of my body. That's not who I am. They are all temporary. The soul has no gender, as I've been saying. And as I step back, even identifying with my story, what's happened to me, how people have treated me, what people have done, it's like I'm coming back to the essence. Who am I? I am a peaceful soul. And that's the first anchor I put down to make me really stable. The second is this relationship with the divine, the relationship with God. And just as I am a soul, I see the divine as a soul too. I'm a soul that's done actions, and I've reaped the fruit of my actions. We all know happiness and sorrow. But the divine is a being that's beyond the influence of happiness and sorrow. It's not a concept or a belief or an intellectual idea. We're actually talking about a real living soul. You are seeing me standing here. I think I've been standing here talking, and I'm going to stop soon. But I'm a soul expressing through my body. You can see me, I'm talking, making gestures. God, as I see it, the divine is a soul that does not have a human form, does not have a physical body, but a real living being. And in a sense, meditation is developing a relationship, a soul-to-soul relationship, as the way really to empower myself. And what I do when I meditate is, as I've let go and I've become aware of who I am, I look through the eye of the mind and I see and touch, connect with the Supreme Being and allow myself to be completely loved. And this love is like an anchor to this relationship, because both the relationship with the self and the relationship with the divine are permanent. And so the fear of loss, the fear of change, the fear of relationships going, I've now got a platform, a relationship with myself and the divine, which is constant and unchanging, no matter how much life changes around me. And it seems to me that we're living in a world at the moment where everything is changing so dramatically. I read a British historian said there's more change in the last 50 years than the rest of history put together. I don't know how they can prove that, but we all know so much is happening. So what do I need to do at this time to deal with all the fear, anxiety, overthinking, over-worrying? I have to give time to really practice not just believe, but reconnect with who I am, experiment with the relationship with the divine, and really lay this solid platform for myself. And I really feel that this is the best investment for me and even my family, because the more I am really stable, I'm managing all the challenges and the fears, that influences those who are close to me and those who I love. So I think I'm going to put a full stop to myself and I think I'll leave it to Leela. Thank you.